千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now. To be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process of the Tao. As you may recall from our previous meeting, previously we talked about the Chinese title for chapter 62. There's a couple of characters in the title, and the Chinese titles are always two characters followed by the character for the chapter, 章. So the two characters, the first one is simply Tao, and the second character, the character in the middle that you see in the screen, is profound or wondrous. So flip that around to make it syntactically English-like, and we have the profound Tao chapter. So this chapter expresses a sense of awe at the greatness of the Tao and explains why the Tao is so valuable. So let's take a look at the chapter itself. As you can see, we have 15 lines in chapter 62. So the very first thing that we did was that we divided up the chapter into 3 sections based on the hidden structure that we could tell by looking at the repeated characters from one line to the next. And in addition to that, what we also had to do was to understand what the lines are saying so we can follow that train of thought and be able to sense when the meaning of the section transitions to something else. So we got a whole bunch of repeating characters. As you can see, we did our analysis of that. We had the kind person, unkind person. We had the admirable words and actions. Those were all related. Those were all part of the poetic structure. Then we also noted that from line 3 to line 6, we have the same characters representing the people who are not good, unkind, or unskillful in the Tao. And then that entire train of thought came to a pause after line 7, and then we got into a different topic in section 2, which starts out talking about the crowning of the emperor and the installation of the 3 ministers, the appointment of the 3 ministers in a ceremony. That's actually where we ended up last time. We got to line 9, so a little more than halfway through. And so for today, we're going to do a quick recap to cover a small part of the first section, and then talk about the value, talk about the crowning of the emperor and the 3 ministers, and then we continue on to the rest of the chapter. So that is the plan. Now, the small part of the first section that we should talk about, that we should reiterate based on feedback, based on reaction, is about the admirable words and admirable actions. So you see in line 4 and line 5, we have the admirable words, 美言. In line 5, we have the admirable actions, 美行. So admirable words, the same 2 characters appeared in chapter 81 of the Tao Te Ching. There, it appeared in a negative context. Beautiful words, although it's the same two characters translated in a slightly different way. So beautiful words carries the negative connotation that the beautiful words are meant to be deceptive, to cover something up, and therefore beautiful words are not trustworthy. Here in this chapter, it's a completely positive connotation, unlike 81. And that's why instead of beautiful words, admirable words. So admirable words are words spoken in accordance to the Tao. This can be words that we speak to other people. This, for the public, may be a stirring speech, an inspirational speech by a public figure. In everyday situations, it can be encouraging words, positive words, words of goodwill that you direct at other people, people you interact with. And let's not forget, we are constantly speaking to ourselves. We all have self-talk. So there are encouraging positive words in accordance to the Tao that we also utter for our own benefit, that nobody else can hear, only we can hear ourselves speaking to ourselves. So in all of these cases, it's very powerful if you use these words and actions in accordance with the Tao correctly, you can produce a great effect. So what Lao Tzu says is that admirable words can win the public's respect. So you can take that in a couple of different ways. If it's an inspirational speech, it can definitely win the public's respect. Now, if you direct admirable words at yourself to remind yourself to act in accordance with the Tao, which is the line below, then you too can win the public's respect. Other people respect you as a person of integrity. And these actions, these words and actions can improve other people as well because they may see you as an example to emulate, or you may be encouraging them, you may be mentoring them, guiding them, nurturing them toward the Tao. So I want to reiterate from last time how powerful they can be. And let me also be very clear, the power of words and actions in accordance to the Tao does not come from the quantity of words and actions. So it is not necessary to speak a lot or to do a lot in order for that to be words and actions in accordance to the Tao. Nor is it necessary to deliver those words and actions in a forceful way. So that has nothing to do with it. The power of these words and actions, the admirable words and actions, come entirely from the fact that they originate from the Tao, and therefore they are clarifying to the truth, that they may be pointing things out, or they may be doing something small that makes a big difference. So previously, to illustrate that, I went through a bunch of examples, and I think, it is extremely important for us when we have this particular meeting that we don't just talk about the abstract principles. We always want to tie them back in to real life, everyday life. How do we use them? How do we make things better for ourselves and for the people around us that we care about? So this particular slide, the title, Small Shift Toward the Tao, and that's because oftentimes even a small adjustment in what we say to ourselves can make a huge difference. It can put us on the path. So the examples that we talked about last time, we can go from life is hard to life is easy. Life indeed can be easy, and the path of the Tao is all about that. It's all about how you can make small changes, make things easier for you so that you live your life with effortless grace. Then We talked about other small shifts that can make a big difference. So for instance, a little further down, we talked about how we can say to ourselves when we encounter an obstacle that it's a problem. It's a problem is a negative frame that talks about this being a burden, being a headache, something that creates trouble for you. But if you were to shift it subtly from problem to challenge, it's a one-word change, and the obstacle is still the same as it was before. It hasn't changed, but the mentality can change because a challenge is a test. It's a test to see if you are as good as you think you are. It's a test to see, do you really want it? Are you serious about this? So in that way, it can be very positive. You can then rise to the challenge, whereas you might have previously been stopped by the problem, slowed down by the obstacle. So the small shift can be very powerful. So because of the feedback, because of the reaction, I want to present additional ways, additional shifts or adjustments in the way that we think, in the things that we say to ourselves and to other people. So you can go from a negativity expression to mei yan, an admirable expression in accordance with the Tao. So what are those additional examples? Well, so just like last time, I'll present the negative frame and then switching to the positive. Here's something negative. It has to be perfect. Now, many people consider themselves to be perfectionists, and therefore they will say this to themselves, and they will also say it to other people. It has to be perfect. The reason why perfectionists say that is because they think of themselves as having high standards. They think that is a positive thing. Now, you know what I know just by living life, that in reality, being too much of a perfectionist means you can be difficult, difficult to work with, difficult to live with. And nothing is ever completed because nothing is ever good enough. Perfection is very elusive. Indeed, we have this common expression that says perfection is the enemy of good enough. So good enough is actually the positive frame. It has to be good enough. So you see, perfectionists think of themselves as having high standards, but in reality, the real high standard is the person who says it has to be good enough. Good enough is what it really means to have high standards. High standards do not actually belong to perfectionists. Impossibilities belong to perfectionists. So a small shift from perfect to good enough gets you from negative to positive. Here's another one. I must be better than others. This is all about comparison of oneself against other people, to compete against them, to see where they're at, see where you are, and then perhaps feel depressed. This is to contend against others, to fight, to be in the rat race. So that's actually not the Tao. The Tao is not externally directed like that. The Tao is internally directed. It's about bettering oneself. It's about self-mastery. So it becomes, instead of I must be better than others, it's inwardly directed. I must be better than before, meaning who I am today is going to be a little better than who I was yesterday. Who I am this year is going to be better than I was last year. That is the path towards self-mastery. There's no attempt in the Tao for anyone to try to master other people, only oneself. So again, this is a small shift from the negative to the positive. Let's take a look at another one. This one is common. In life, oftentimes we encounter a situation where people say, you gotta choose. Come on, A or B, hurry up, make your choice, pick your option. It's gotta be one or the other. That's actually negative. The reason why it's negative is that life choices are rarely binary. They're rarely A or B, yes or no, up or down. To say that you must choose, that can be illusory. If you open up your mind, if you look at it through the eyes of the Tao, you will find other possibilities. Does it really have to be one or the other? Is it possible that it can be neither, or that it can be both, or it can be something else? That something else may be triangulation that is neither A nor B, and it's not between A or B, but somewhere that is outside of the two. And yet, in a situation where both sides are in contentious battle with one another, the triangulated third choice may be acceptable to both as a reasonable compromise. Skillful diplomacy is often built on this principle. So you can go from negative, which is a strict binary choice, true or false. Come on, go ahead, make your choice. To something that is, well, let's take a look. Can it be something else? Next, also something that produces a lot of stress and tension and anxiety. Failure is not an option. That's putting a lot of pressure on yourself. We hear this all the time. Failure is not an option. It seems to underscore how determined you are. And yet, as I point out, it's a great source of stress and tension. What would be more Tao-like? Well, it's a phrase that has become very popular among entrepreneurs. Fail better. And there's wisdom in that. Fail better just means that it's okay to fail as long as you better yourself from the experience. That is, as long as you have learned something about the issue, so that when you make another attempt, you're going to be better at it and perhaps succeed or fail in a different way, in which case you'll learn additional lessons. Bottom line is that you become more knowledgeable, more proficient. You won't fail the same way again. And oftentimes, real masters will say that they failed multiple times on their path to mastery. Same for all of us. We may fail multiple times as we work our way toward mastery. That's the way it is with life. So that's the Tao. And then next one, it means nothing. Well, we hear that a lot. I want to point out that in the study of Zen, Tao philosophy, etc., you will oftentimes hear people say life has no meaning, life doesn't mean anything, existence has no meaning, etc. That's actually not the authentic Tao tradition. The insight from the Tao sages is that the reason why existence appears to be devoid of meaning is because it means what I decide it means. It's a blank canvas that invites your creative contribution. Of course, your life, the meaning of your life is up to you to decide. It's a blank canvas. You got to be putting something there. You have to put in your own personal touch, your own colors, your own art. and ultimately your own masterpiece. So it doesn't matter what things mean, you have to take mastery, you have to take charge of that and decide what it means for you. When something bad has happened, you have to figure out what it means. Something for me to learn, a warning for me to not do the same thing again. It means what you decide it means, and it means something that's empowering to you. And one more, just a couple more. Why me? I hear this from people who bemoan their fate, that they complain about what's been happening to them. Sometimes they look to the sky. Why me? Why me, Lord? Why is it always like this? Why do things always happen to me? Why? Why? So that is a negative mindset because it is helpless. If you inject one word into it, it turns it from negative to positive. Why not me? Why not me is when you say other people have done it, why not me? Other people are living the good life, why not me? Other people can accomplish these incredible feats, why not me? What other people can accomplish, what other human beings can do, I too have the possibility of accomplishing that. So opening up that possibility turns it into something that's positive. Okay, and then let's do the last one. I think you get the idea. The last one says motivation precedes action. This is not necessarily something to say, but that's something people think about, because people often say things like, well, I don't want to do it because I don't feel like doing it. When they say, I don't feel like doing it, when you say the same thing, when anyone says that, I don't feel like doing it, the assumption is motivation precedes action. You got to feel like doing it in order to do it. So motivation comes first. So that's actually negative because it leads to a lot of procrastination. It actually leads to being passive, lethargic, producing no results for yourself. How do we subtly change this? How do we make a small shift toward the Tao? Well, here's the truth. This is spoken of actually in the Tao Te Ching. Most people don't realize it, but it's one of the major lessons that we're going to talk about in 63. And the small shift is to turn that around. Action precedes motivation. It seems weird. Well, how can I have any action if I'm not motivated to take any action? Well, the interesting thing about the positive framing is that when you put that into practice in your life, you realize it's true. You don't feel like doing something, but if you start doing just a little bit of it, start taking some steps towards that, doing it makes you feel like doing more of it. That's true in life. So Lao Tzu will advise more about that in 63. For now, take it on faith. This is something that's made a huge difference in my life. I used to be one of those teenagers who felt, I don't want to do it because I don't feel like doing it, and you can't make me. Later on, my life changed when I realized that what if I start doing something, even though I don't feel like doing it, the action, the act of doing it, creates the motivation. So more on that later. Now, it is time to get back to the Tao Te Ching. So we previously stopped at this point where we talked about the crowning of the emperor and the installation of the three ministers. So to crown the emperor is to establish the highest position of power in ancient China. So this was the greatest spectacle of all. And almost as great because the three ministers report directly to the emperor, almost as great was the appointment in ritualistic fashion of the three emperors. not at the same level as a coronation, but still a spectacle. These were the most powerful officials in ancient China. So we stopped at this point, and so now we want to continue on to the rest of the Tao Te Ching, chapter 62. Line 10. Although there is the offering of jade before 4 horses. Let's decrypt that. Let's unpack this line. First, we want to talk about the offering of jade. This is the ceremonial offering of jade that is very appropriate in these high-level ceremonies that we're talking about, these spectacles in ancient times. Jade in ancient China has always been a traditional symbol of power. So therefore, in mythology, in ancient Chinese mythology, the ruler in the heavenly court is the Jade Emperor, Yu Di. So that character, Yu, is as you see here in red. So I want to talk about this character. I think is something that's worth noting. It's the character plus a dot. The character in the middle, the 3 lines bisected by a vertical line, that's the character for Wang, which means king. And then when you put a dot in there, it becomes jade. That's the character for jade. So it goes from Wang to Yu. The difference, that little dot, you can think of it as denoting the jade that is worn by the king or the emperor, symbol of power. Now, let's talk about the 4 horses or the 4 steeds, the 4 finest steeds in that ceremonial offering. So we talked about Yu, jade, symbolizing power since ancient times because it is precious, it's beautiful. What about the finest steeds? Well, ceremonially, in that ancient metaphor, the 4 horses represent reaching the 4 corners of the empire. It was a way to say that the power of the emperor reached all corners of the empire. So yet another expression of power, but in a slightly different way. So then there's a little more that we should say about that. Together, the offering of jade and the offering of the steeds, they go into the crowning ceremony to make it special. So as I mentioned before, this was a magnificent spectacle of opulence. It was the pinnacle of ancient Chinese civilization. And yet, Lao Tzu is pointing them out specifically to say that although these were at the very top of ancient Chinese civilization, they could not compare to the Tao because in the Tao perspective, it was all transient. It was a display of power to have a ceremony like that, but it's a display that comes and goes. Nothing lasts. The emperor was not going to last forever, was not going to live forever. Neither were the 3 ministers. These were not the constant and eternal Tao. So that is the reason why Lao Tzu would say, all that display of opulence, of power, grandeur, none of it could compare. So line 11 says, none of it can compare to being seated in this Tao. That's the translation. So we've got a line with 6 characters. Let me break them down for you. 1 character at a time, separately. First 2 characters together is cannot compare. So the first character is the negation character. It means not. And then the second character is compare. Cannot compare. Then the third character means to sit or to be seated. And then the fourth character is to enter or to be in. And then next to last character, this. The last character, Dao. So if you were to put that together, if you were to transcribe verbatim, cannot compare to sitting in this Dao is roughly what you would get. So clean that up a little bit, and we get the translation. None of it can compare to being seated in this Tao. So what does that mean? Specifically, nothing in the material world can compare to the Tao. You can go to the very top of the material world, the very best, the greatest in the material world, and it still doesn't compare. So now the question, why is that? What makes the Tao special? Now, I'm going to make this statement here, and I want to explain why I say that. This is a topic that requires clarity because we don't want to just use a simplistic slogan like, well, the Tao is beyond price, the Tao is beyond value, the Tao is priceless. I want to explore specifically why using practical examples from life. Because remember, ultimately, everything we talk about has to apply to life. Now, I know for a fact that when we discuss something like this, there are people who are very glib with answers like, well, the specialness of the Tao cannot be expressed with words. That's what chapter 1 says, right? Okay, well, that's much too glib. We want to be more down to earth. We want to examine and illuminate with clarity. Now, there are no formal guidelines. There isn't like a number list of items where you can say, oh yeah, well, number 1 is XYZ, number 2 is ABC, but we can definitely use examples to illustrate the specialness of the Tao. So I have 2 lists. To the left is the Tao, to the right is the material world. So the Tao perspective and the material perspective are definitely different. So as an example, number 1, on the Tao side, the Tao is eternal, the Tao is everlasting and therefore real. So basically in the Tao, similar to the way it is in Buddhism, the idea is that if you've got something that comes and goes, it is so fleeting, it isn't real, it's not solid, it's not constant. It's like a flame that burns, but then burns out. So after a while, its effect is gone. And therefore, it is only temporary, it is only transient, it's impermanent. That describes most of the material world. So when we talk about any material objects or material phenomena, they're all transient, they're all impermanent. And in Buddhism, specifically, the term applied to them is that they're all illusory. They come and go, they don't last, they're not real. So that's one of the things that makes Tao different from our material acquisitions. The other thing that we experience when we follow the Tao is the happiness of the Tao takes on the eternal characteristic of the Tao. So it's constant, it's lasting, it's something that doesn't leave, it just stays with you. Whereas we also know from experience, if you chase after things or fame and fortune, you can be temporarily thrilled if you get something. If you buy a nice gadget, it can be momentarily something that brings you a lot of joy, but then after a while, it just fades. And your desire for more is never really satisfied, so it becomes a bottomless pit. So that thrill doesn't last. Then there is also the difference between the goal of the Tao versus the various goals that we have in the material world. So for instance, with the Tao, it's always internally directed. It's always going to be, it has to be about material, about enlightenment apart from the material aspects of life. Whereas in the material world, we're looking for material pursuits. We're looking for the fame and fortune that I alluded to in number 2. And therefore, that cannot compare to the Tao. So all of these so far on the right cannot compare to anything on the left. And there's more. When we talk about the Tao, we're talking about living life with meaning, and meaning is purpose. It is meaning with intention, with an idea of what it is that you want. And as far as the material world, that perspective would be letting life go to waste, because everything above this point, number 1, 2, and 3, those do not contribute to the meaning. Now, when we internally direct ourselves to pursue the Tao, we transform the self. And you know this if you have kept yourself on the path for an extended period of time, you find yourself changing for the better. You may not notice at first because the changes are gradual and imperceptible. You may think there is nothing different about you, but positive transformation is the inevitable result of Tao cultivation. Occasionally, other people may comment on you being more composed, more at ease, even in a difficult situation. Occasionally, people who have not seen you in a while may remark on the difference they perceive in you. So these are real changes that will last you a lifetime. The benefits that bring you are a small part in the value of the Tao, in the great value of the Tao. So transforming the self being dynamic, that's on the Tao side. The opposite is true in the material perspective. There is a static and stagnant existence. The material acquisitions don't really make you happy. And what is truly happy, I think everybody has this experience. When you're learning something new, when you're bettering yourself, that's when you've got real joy. And that's on the left-hand side. So just a few more. Connecting with people. Another way to see the value of the Tao is to remember what happens when you connect with kindred spirits, other people who see life the same way, who are aware of the Tao. And this may be an old friend. This may be someone you have just met. Either way, when you establish rapport with this other individual, you can feel spiritual energies harmonizing with someone else. When you talk to that person, hours may go by as the conversation flows. When you're finally done, you're surprised by the amount of time that has passed. And that is all part of the Tao. It's related to the Tao. It's effortless, it's eternal, it's timeless. So that's another way to see the value of the Tao. That's the reason why the Tao emphasizes people and the material perspective emphasizes things, the accumulation, the addition of even more than what you had before. And Finally, I want to also talk about connecting with the truth. So, what happens when you connect with the truth? One way to see the value of the Tao is to recall that moment in time when you connect with the great truth. It's unmistakable because the truth reaches deeply into you to resonate with you, and it's incredibly powerful. It can move you to tears. It can make you jump for joy. It can shake you up with the truth of recognition. So in that moment, you realize that the Tao is both the path that leads us to the truth and the essence of the truth itself. And that's the value of the Tao. The truth that when you are mired in the material world, you may never actually realize. So all of these are different ways to help us answer the question posed by Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu is asking, why did the ancients value this Tao so much? The value of the Tao is also timeless, like the Tao itself. So it was valuable to the ancients, and it is valuable to us. Its value to humanity is constant over time. And I would suggest that as we live our everyday lives, you can glimpse this value when there's a moment of gratitude. Like when you notice and appreciate cool little things in life. And it's the little things in life that are your favorite things in life. You may glimpse the value of the Tao when you have an epiphany. An epiphany is the moment when the light bulb comes on. It's the aha. Oh, I just figured something out. I just figured out, especially another piece of the puzzle called life and enlightenment. That's when you glimpse the value of the Tao. Now, that may not happen very much. It's a rare experience to have an epiphany, but more common is the next one, connecting with kids, quality time with kids. This is a way for us to get reacquainted with an elemental part of ourselves. The part of ourselves that is always there, that is pure, that is so good and so incredibly basic and joyous. Kids remind us of that, and we can learn something from them, or more accurately, we can rediscover something that we have always known by connecting with them. So I think everybody has had that experience. It is something to treasure. And sometimes spending time with animals, because it's touching that elemental basic part inside of you, it can have much the same effect. Then you glimpse the value of the Tao. Then connecting with yourself. Let's not discount that. In a quiet moment, when you connect with the deep part of yourself, when you're deep in reflection, contemplation, you also connect with the Tao. And that is a powerful experience all by itself. That's how you see that you are in contact with the value of the Tao. So having talked about this topic, why is the Tao so precious? Why is the Tao beyond value? I think we're okay with that topic now, and we're ready to move on to the last part of the Tao Te Ching, lines 13, 14, and 15. Line 13 says, is it not said that those who seek will find? So let me break down the first two characters for you. Literally, the first character is the negation character, no or not. And the second character is the character for say. No say It's actually, as you see in the translation, is it not said? That's what it actually means. Then let's break down the last three characters there. You can see in the translation the following is it not said, you've got that those who seek will find. So what does that mean? Well, if we're willing to seek, we too will find. So to seek is to seek the Tao. It does not actually mean aimless wandering. So the carefree wandering talked about by Zhuangzi, another great sage in the Tao tradition, is actually not aimless. It's carefree, but it's actually with purpose. It's actually a mission in life. It's a sacred quest. And the sacred quest in life has a sacred objective. It has a divine purpose. So following the Tao guarantees we will get to the destination. So the Tao is the path. The path leads to something. It is the path that leads to the place, the destination, the enlightenment, the oneness with the Tao, the mastery of life, and so on. So the whole idea to get on the path is to follow it to the place that we want to go. Same idea that we drive onto the on-ramp on the freeway is because we want to head for a particular destination. So then let's take a look at line 14. Those with guilt will not be faulted. Let's think about that for a moment. Those with guilt will not be faulted. This actually doesn't mean that Tao cultivators get away with crimes. It has a very specific meaning. It means the Tao does not judge. The Tao is not a human-like entity. It is not a human-like deity. So there's no judging by the Tao. The Tao does not accuse, does not condemn, it doesn't blame, it doesn't complain about you. It just is. It doesn't have human emotions. So all the guilt, all the fault, that's going to be from your perspective, not the perspective of the Tao. The suffering is experienced by you and you only for the actions that you have caused. So from the Tao perspective, about you getting on the right path in life, it is never too late. That as long as you are living and learning, there's always the possibility that you can turn things around. So this is part of the important lessons of this particular chapter. This particular line here echoes previous lines in the chapter. Now, before we get to that, I want to illustrate this slide specifically because remember, we're not talking about Tao cultivators getting away with crimes. We're talking about people who are maybe not understanding the Tao, not being judged, but given the chance to turn things around so that they can find a path for themselves. Let me explain what that means with a story. This story is called Eliminate Three Horrors. As you can see at the bottom, in Chinese, 周楚除三害. So let me tell you what that story is. Once upon a time in ancient China, there was a young man by the name of Zhou. This particular young man was special. He was naturally gifted with great strength, just a powerful guy. And by virtue of being the most powerful around, strength-wise, he always did everything his way. He got whatever he wanted. He did whatever he pleased. He never gave it a second thought. He caused a lot of trouble. He easily dominated everyone in his environment. Wasn't necessarily out of malice, but still, he caused a lot of problems. People were afraid of him, afraid of his great strength. People avoided him whenever possible. Now, he was oblivious to all this. He never paid too much attention. He was not aware of the way that people saw him, the way people looked at him. He just went on living his life, kind of happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Now, in that area, in the area where he lived, there's a nearby mountain, and there was a fierce tiger that lived in the mountain. This fierce tiger posed a lot of problems to the human population there because it often came down from the mountain to terrorize the farmers and cattle. Although there were hunters in the area, they were no match for the fast, cunning, and powerful predator. They couldn't do anything. Now, as if that wasn't enough, in that area, there was also a monstrous water serpent in the river below the bridge. That, just like the tiger, the serpent often emerged to terrorize the fishermen and ferrymen. So the people there had no idea how to capture or kill this beast. So the tiger was bad enough, and they also had this monstrous water serpent to worry about. And in fact, the people there spoke of the tiger, the serpent, and Zhou, this young man, as the three horrors. And when they discussed the three horrors, they all agreed that Zhou was probably their biggest problem. The tiger, the serpent, you could maybe get far away from them, but it seemed like you could never get far enough away from Zhou, the troublemaker. So one day, this young man, Zhou, noticed a whole bunch of elderly people in his village. They all seemed rather unhappy. So he noticed this and he got curious. So he approached one of them, one of the elders, and he asked, "It's a good year, isn't it? It's a good year for harvest, plentiful harvest. There's widespread prosperity, so things are good. The weather is good. Why do you seem so unhappy?" So the old man replied, pulling no punches. The old man said, "We're still troubled by the three horrors. What reason do we have to be happy?" So the old man was rather blunt. He did not gloss over anything. He just told him straight up, it's because of the three horrors. Zhou became curious. Three horrors? What are you talking about? What are the three horrors? And again, the old man was blunt, held nothing back. He point blank said to Zhou, "Well, look, tiger in the mountain, serpent under the bridge, and you, 1, 2, and 3, the three horrors." So Zhou, the young man, was surprised to be one of the three. So he turned this over in his mind, and then he said, okay, well, since everyone is troubled by the beasts, I will find them and I will eliminate them. Okay? So he armed himself and he went into the mountain. That was the first task. After much tracking, he eventually was able to locate the tiger. He found the tiger. The tiger pounced on him, fierce and dangerous as ever. But Zhou Chu was ready with bow and arrows. He shot his arrows. The arrows found the mark. The fierce tiger was struck several times. He tried to get those arrows out in vain. They protruded from him. It struggled for a while in great pain. It was mortally wounded. After a while, the tiger was dead. So that was the killing of the first horror. So then next, Zhou Chu dove into the river to battle with the serpent. This proved to be much tougher than the tiger. He struggled with the serpent, wrestled with it, he stabbed at it, he attacked it. The serpent in turn tried to crush him, and they fought like this while going downstream for many miles. The serpent tried to escape, and Zhou Chu swam after it, and eventually the two of them, Zhou Chu and the serpent, disappeared from view of the villagers, going further downstream. Now, a few days passed after that battle. There were still no signs of either the serpent or Zhou Chu. The villagers figured, well, if the serpent was to appear, but then they don't see any sign of Zhou Chu, then they can pretty much safely conclude that the young man had filled the belly of the monstrous serpent. Or if it was the other way around, if Zhou Chu appeared but no serpents, then he succeeded in killing the serpent. This was the best of all possible worlds. Neither one of them emerged, which meant they probably both perished in the battle. So this was a cause for celebration. They decided to put together a celebration, a massive celebration, about the total elimination of all three horrors. So everybody is happy, everybody is, having a great time. And in fact, Zhou Chu was not actually dead. He was exhausted after slaying the serpent, but still very much alive. He had to rest for hours to recover his strength. But then after that, he was able to start back to the village with slow, painful steps. When he finally made it back to the village, he saw the celebration that was taking place. Right in the middle of the celebration, he barged in and he assumed, oh, everybody must be celebrating me because I killed the two gray horrors. But then people saw him, oh, it's you. They seemed surprised, and not in a good way. Like, instead of, oh, you, the great hero, yay, people saw him was like, oh, it's you, oh, bummer. After a while, he found out that they were so happy right before they saw him, only because they thought he was dead along with the other two beasts. The celebration had signage, had posters, and it actually included his supposed death as a big part of the celebration. This finally drove the point home for Zhou Chu. It dawned on him just how much he was feared and disliked by everyone. They were celebrating his death. So depressed, he decided to leave the village and study with a teacher in order to figure out what to do with his life. He said to his teacher, I am sorry I never realized my faults until recently. I wasted a lot of precious time. Now I want to walk the right path, but I am afraid it may be too late. His teacher said, do not be discouraged. You have made a commitment to yourself, so it is never hopeless. His teacher turned out to be correct. It was as if Zhou Chu became a completely different person. He was considerate. He was self-aware. He was someone who treated others with respect. He won a lot of praise as someone who made valuable contributions to society in many different ways. After a few years, everyone recognized that Zhou Chu had transformed himself from a horror to a legend. So indeed, it was true. Zhou Chu succeeded in eliminating the three horrors, including himself. The end. So I want to talk about this story for just a moment. This story is often told by Dao masters when discussing and explaining this particular chapter of the Dao De Jing. So I would like to explore with you the various aspects of it, the symbology, the representations, etc. What is the Tao of this story? So let's think about the main character, Zhou Chu. In the beginning of the story, he was a bad person, the unkind person, the person who was not skillful about the art of living life. So the beginning of this chapter talks about 不善人, the bad person. He was ignorant of the Tao. He was not receptive to the Tao. Perhaps had no idea what the Tao was. And without a doubt, the second point was that he was lacking in self-awareness. He didn't know how people thought of him. He had no idea. He just assumed that they were fine with him. He lacked all self-awareness. That's a defining characteristic of someone who is not cultivating the Tao. And lastly, in number 3, we can all see that in the beginning of the story, Zhou Chu was far from living up to his full potential. So now we can see little echoes of ourselves in this main character. At least we have become aware of ourselves and the Tao. At least we're studying and learning about the Tao together. So we're a little bit better off, but we're also like him in that we have not yet lived up to our potential. So this is the illustration of this chapter where Lao Tzu says, those with guilt will not be faulted because the Tao itself doesn't fault anyone. It simply is. It simply does what it does. The faulting has to be done by human beings, and the guilt is felt by human beings, and that's it. Human beings have a chance to make amends. It's never too late. And then those who seek will find. So at the end of the story, Zhou Chu went forth seeking the Tao, seeking understanding, enlightenment, a way to make himself better. And he found the right path for himself. So this is why we talk about those with guilt will not be faulted. Everybody has a chance to turn things around. And that's one of the things that makes the Tao of great value, is because this is what it does. So moving on, I want to remind everyone about the lines that we have already gone through, because this line here, those with guilt will not be faulted, is an echo of previous lines. For instance, further back up, lines 2 and 3, near the beginning, it says, the treasure of the kind person, the protection of the unkind person. This is in reference to the Tao itself. The Tao is treasured, cherished by the kind person, the good person, the aware person. And for those who are not good, not kind, not aware, the Tao nevertheless provides protection for them in the sense that they too get to continue their lives so that they can have another chance to turn things around. Those who are unkind have an opportunity to change. Those who are not good may realize their own faults. So that's the first of the two places where this concept is echoed. I wanted to point that out. And let me also say that Zhou Chu, at the end of the story, he had a plan. He had a goal, and that was to better himself. He had a plan, was to seek out a teacher. He had the discipline to stick to the plan, and that was to study the Tao. So as long as we keep following the right path, as I mentioned previously, the Tao guarantees we'll get to the destination. So just a little more, yet another echo from previous lines, a little further down in the middle of the chapter, lines 6 and 7, those who are unkind, how can they be abandoned? So what we're seeing is that the Tao does not abandon anyone. The Tao does not abandon those who are less than perfect. And come to think of it, is any one of us perfect? Probably not. So those who are not so great with the Tao may discover the Tao and find the right path in life. So the same is true for all of us. Hopefully, we are all on the path. Maybe once in a while we stray from it, but we can always find our way back to it. This brings us to the final line. Therefore, it is the greatest value in the world. That is, this is why the Tao is the greatest value in the world. Ultimately, it isn't the Tao that makes any decisions for you. You have to take responsibility for yourself. You have to decide for yourself. The Tao will not force you onto a particular path. It's not going to make you be good. There's no forcing of anyone to do anything in the Tao. Your transformation of yourself is going to be your own decision. But if it's your own decision, then your accomplishments, your victories will also be your own. It isn't worth as much if you were forced, if you had to be forced into doing it, because it's somebody else's purpose, not your own. So the bottom line is that nobody is perfect, but everybody can change for the better. That's what the Tao is about, and that's the message from this chapter. And now that we're at the last line, we can now do the paraphrase of the whole chapter to really let that meaning sink in. So we want to demonstrate our understanding by expressing the original using modern language. How would that look? So we've divided this up into 3 sections, and we'll go section by section. The first part starts out talking about the Tao as the wonder of all things. It's cherished by the kind people, protecting the unkind people, and then it goes into the admirable words and actions. And then it talks about how the Tao doesn't abandon anybody. So let's go ahead and paraphrase that. We want to convey all of those major ideas. The Tao is the wonder of wonders in the world, and the greatest value beyond price. For those who are good, kind, and skillful in the art of living life, the Tao is their treasure. For those who are not yet at that level, the Tao still protects them and provides them with what they need to keep going. We can use the Tao in the form of positive words and good deeds to inspire people or help them. we can also do the same for ourselves. Such words and actions don't have to be elaborate to make a difference. For the negative people out there who are beyond help or inspiration, the Tao compels us to be compassionate and not give up on them. And this is because, as we mentioned, the Tao doesn't give up on anybody. In nature, nothing is ever wasted. From the Tao perspective and also the Buddhist perspective, if you're not turning things around in this lifetime, you have to come back and you have to keep learning the lesson until you get it. So let's proceed on to the second section. The second section, remember, is about the grand spectacles in ancient China, the crowning of the emperor, the appointment of the three ministers, the offering of jade, the finest steeds, etc. And yet, none of those things can compare to the Tao. So let's go ahead and paraphrase that using modern language. Consider the greatest obstacles of all, like the crowning of the emperor or the appointments of the three ministers. Such grand ceremonies involve rituals like the offering of jade and the four magnificent steeds. However, as amazing as they belong to the material world and cannot compare to the simple pleasures of being immersed in the Tao. So when we look at a section like this, we also have to keep in mind the time of Lao Tzu, prior to all the technological marvels of modern civilization. So for the ancients, grand spectacles would not be like, for instance, a televised sporting event. They would have to look for a different example to talk about the grandest spectacles of all in the material world. So logically, the crowning of the emperor will become that, will be pointed out as representing all material world accomplishments at the very top of it. And yet, the major point is that none of it can compare to the simple pleasures of being immersed in the Tao. And this takes us to the very last section here. This is about the value of the Tao. Why did the ancients value this Tao so much? So we've talked about it quite a bit, about the many different ways that we can perceive the value of the Tao. And then we illustrate it with the story about this young man who had no idea, not a single clue about himself, and then finally eliminating 2 out of the 3 horrors, discovering himself to be the third. Then he took action to eliminate his old self. He improved himself so that not a trace of his former self remained. It was also eliminated. So let's go ahead and convey or express the last section with our paraphrase. Why is that? Why did the ancients value the Tao above all? They knew it was the way. Those who follow it will gain everything. Those who fail to follow it only make things more difficult for themselves. Even so, the Tao does not judge and will give them every opportunity to choose the right path. This is why the Tao is the greatest wonder of all and the ultimate priceless value. So that is the paraphrase for 62. So the last thing that we have to do is the full circle of 62. And here in this slide, you will see that we have the first line of 62 on top and the last line at the bottom. So let's take a look at how things come back full circle. In the last line of 62, Lao Tzu says the Tao is the greatest value in the world. So literally, that's the line, that's the last line there, is the greatest value in the world. That we link this back to the beginning, and that talks about the Tao being the wonder of all things. So you can see right away that these two lines are talking about the same thing. One says it's the greatest value, the other one says it's the wonder of the world. This is one of the clearest examples that every chapter in the Tao Te Ching forms a circle in meaning, and the last part connects with the first part. So the emphasis is what we're going to be giving it as well. We should be treasuring and cherishing the Tao because it is the greatest power and the ultimate gift. And the line that I have selected to depict that, the Tao is the wonder of all things, at the bottom there. So that is the conclusion of our discussion on Tao Te Ching chapter 62. And we want to, one of the things that we should do is to include all the concepts that we talked about today in the summary. So let me head for the summary slides. This gives us a clean division so that next time we can begin with the start of the next chapter, 63. For now, though, I have 2 slides to summarize 62. This is part 1 of 2 parts. So the priceless Tao, it is the wonder of all things. It's a treasure for the good, the people who are good. It's the protection for the people who are not so good. So we have definitely seen examples of that. And certainly we have seen how that's illustrated in the story today. And today, we talked about Tao as the greatest value. So how can we see the value? Well, we started out talking about words and actions from last time. And we talked about how even a small shift in the words and actions can make a huge difference in life. So speaking and acting in accordance to the Tao has a powerful effect on other people and also on ourselves. Then today, we also spoke of how nothing in the world can compare. The Tao surpasses anything in the material world. So even though our world is more complex today, and there's more that the world can offer now, it is still the material world. So nothing in it fundamentally has changed since ancient times. It is still true that the intangible, eternal, constant Tao is still far greater than anything that we can come up with in our material existence. Lastly, the Tao is the greatest value because those who seek will find. So the Tao does not judge or assign blame. Remember, the Tao is not a deity. It doesn't sit in judgment of us. We sit in judgment of ourselves and oftentimes one another. The Tao doesn't do that. Instead, the Tao provides the environment for us to continue learning our dharmic lessons until we finally get it, until it finally occurs to us, oh, this is what I should be doing. Until it finally dawns on us, just like it did for Zhou, that, oh, this is who I really am, and I need to be better. The Tao is ready whenever you are. Here, I like to say, rather than to talk about when the student is ready, the master appears. I see myself as a fellow traveler for everyone who was in this meeting. Therefore, I like to rephrase this expression as when the traveler is ready, the path appears. and it is a distinct honor for me to travel with everyone. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.